Welcome to Midnight Grove, where stories take you on magical journeys of self-discovery and wonder. Tonight, we present The Feather and the Stone, a tale of balance, courage, and embracing both freedom and strength. Follow Theo as he learns the wisdom of the Pillar of Balance and finds his own path in a world of infinite possibility. Relax, get cozy, and let this enchanting bedtime story guide you into the heart of dreams. Chapter 1: The Choice. In the heart of Windvale Valley, where golden fields met dense forests and streams, wove like silver threads through the land, lay the small village of Elderwood. It was a quiet, picturesque place where the daily rhythm of life was steady and unchanging. The villagers worked hard, laughed loudly, and gathered every evening to share stories by the fire. At the center of the village stood a tall stone pillar that seemed as old as the hills themselves. The Pillar of Balance was weathered with time, its surface marked by intricate carvings of feathers and stones. It was both a symbol and a reminder of the tradition that defined Elderwood, the choosing. For centuries, the people of Elderwood had followed the belief that life was a delicate balance between two forces. The feather symbolized freedom, creativity, and lightness, while the stone represented strength, responsibility, and stability. Every child, upon reaching the age of 12, was required to make a choice: to carry a feather or a stone, a physical representation of their path in life. This choice was not made lightly. Once a child selected their object, they were bound to it. The feather carriers were known for their innovation, artistry, and dreamlike quality, while the stone carriers were the builders, the protectors, and the steady hands that kept the village running. For Theo, who had recently turned 12, the day of the choosing loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. Theo's doubt. Unlike most of the other children, Theo did not feel excitement as the day approached. Many of his friends had already made up their minds, eagerly discussing their choices and imagining their futures. But Theo felt a deep, gnawing uncertainty. He admired his older brother Marcus, who had chosen the stone 3 years ago, and now worked alongside their father, repairing the village's tools and maintaining the sturdy bridges that spanned the valley's rivers. Marcus was strong, dependable, and calm in a way that Theo could only dream of being. But then there was Clara, Theo's older sister, who had chosen the feather. She spent her days painting vivid landscapes and writing songs that filled the house with laughter and joy. Clara's creativity seemed to flow effortlessly, her dreams lifting her above the everyday worries that weighed Theo down. "I don't know how to choose," Theo admitted one evening as he sat by the fire, watching Marcus sharpen a blade while Clara sketched in her notebook. Marcus glanced up, his brow furrowing. "What's there to decide? The stone is the obvious choice. It's practical. It means you'll always have a purpose." Clara rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Not everyone wants to be weighed down by responsibility. The feather is about freedom, Theo. It's about following your heart." Theo shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flickering between them. "What if I want both?" Clara and Marcus exchanged a look before laughing. "That's not how it works," Marcus said. "You have to pick," Clara added, her voice gentle but firm. "That's the point of the choosing." Theo didn't reply. He stared into the fire, the crackling flames reflecting the storm of doubt in his mind. The ceremony of the choosing. The day of the choosing dawned bright and clear, the sky a soft blue streaked with wisps of cloud. The entire village gathered in the central square, their voices carrying on the crisp morning air as they prepared for the ceremony. Theo stood near the back of the crowd, his stomach twisting with anxiety. He could see the pillar of balance at the center of the square, its carvings glinting faintly in the sunlight. Beside it stood Ilara, the village elder, her basket of feathers and tray of stones, ready for the children to make their choices. One by one the children stepped forward, their faces a mix of nerves and excitement. "I choose the stone," declared Henry, a broad-shouldered boy with a serious expression. He selected a dark grey stone from the tray and held it high, earning a round of cheers from the crowd. "I choose the feather," said Lila, her voice soft but confident, as she picked a delicate white feather from the basket. The villagers applauded as Ilara placed a golden sash over her shoulders, marking her as a feather carrier. Theo watched them all, his heart sinking with every step closer to his turn. The weight of the decision felt unbearable, and his thoughts spun in circles. When Ilara finally called his name, Theo felt frozen in place. The crowd parted as he stepped forward, their eyes heavy on him as he approached the pillar. "Have you decided, Theo?" Ilara asked, her tone kind but expectant. Theo hesitated. He stared at the tray of stones and the basket of feathers, his mind a blur of doubt and fear. The choice should have felt simple. It should have felt right. But it didn't. Theo began, his voice faltering. "I can't choose." The crowd murmured in surprise, their voices rippling through the square, like the rustle of leaves in the wind. Ilara frowned, her expression softening as she studied Theo. "It's all right to be uncertain," she said gently. "But the choosing is not something that can be delayed indefinitely. You have until the next full moon to decide." Theo nodded, his face burning with embarrassment as he stepped back. The villagers whispered among themselves, their voices carrying a mix of curiosity and disappointment. The forest path. That evening, Theo left the village without telling anyone where he was going. He walked the familiar path into the forest, the cool air calming his racing thoughts. The forest was a place Theo often visited when he needed to think. The trees, tall and ancient, seemed to hum with a quiet wisdom, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. But tonight the forest felt different. The air was heavier, and the shadows stretched longer across the path. Theo heard the sound before he saw the figure, a faint rustling, like the flutter of wings or the scrape of stone against stone. He froze, his eyes scanning the darkness. A cloaked figure stepped into the moonlight, their face partially obscured by the shadows of their hood. The staff they carried was intricately carved, its surface shimmering faintly in the dim light. "Good evening, young one," the figure said, their voice deep and melodic. Theo's heart pounded as he stepped back. "Who are you?" The figure smiled faintly. "A traveler," they said, "but I couldn't help noticing your troubled heart. Perhaps I can help." "How?" Theo asked, his voice trembling. The traveler reached into their cloak and produced a small amulet, a smooth, circular object engraved with the symbols of a feather and a stone. "This will show you the truth of both paths," they said, holding the amulet out to Theo. "Take it and see where it leads you." Theo hesitated, his curiosity battling his fear. Slowly he reached out and took the amulet. The moment it touched his hand, a strange warmth spread through his palm, and the forest around him seemed to shift. "Remember," the traveler said, their voice fading as they stepped back into the shadows, "the answer lies within you." And then they were gone, leaving Theo alone in the forest with the amulet glowing faintly in his hand. Chapter 2. The Path of Lightness. Theo's heart raced as he stood in the forest, the amulet warm in his hand. The air around him seemed charged, as though the trees were holding their breath. He glanced down at the object, its surface shimmering faintly in the moonlight. The feather on one side glowed with a soft golden light, while the stone on the other pulsed faintly with a deep, steady warmth. "What now?" Theo whispered to himself. As if in answer, the amulet began to glow brighter, and the world around Theo seemed to blur. The trees faded, their shapes dissolving into streaks of color, and the ground beneath his feet vanished. For a moment, Theo felt weightless, suspended in a sea of swirling light. When the world came back into focus, Theo found himself standing in a completely different place, a world of wonder. Theo blinked, his eyes adjusting to the brightness of his new surroundings. He was standing in a vast meadow that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The grass was impossibly soft, glowing faintly with hues of blue and gold, and the sky above was a kaleidoscope of shifting colors. Flowers of every shape and size bloomed around him, their petals shimmering as though they were made of glass. Butterflies with wings like stained glass flitted through the air, and a gentle breeze carried the faint sound of laughter and music. Theo turned in a slow circle, his breath catching in his throat. It was the most beautiful place he had ever seen. "Welcome, Theo." The voice startled him, and he turned to see a figure approaching. It was a woman with long, flowing hair that seemed to ripple like water, and her eyes sparkled with a light that reminded Theo of the stars. "Who are you?" Theo asked, his voice trembling. "I am Seraphina," the woman said, her voice soft and melodic. "And this is the realm of lightness." "The realm of lightness?" Theo repeated. Seraphina nodded. "This is the path of the feather, the world of freedom, creativity, and boundless possibility." Theo glanced around the meadow, his unease melting away as he took in the beauty of the realm. "It's amazing," he said. Seraphina smiled. "Come, Theo, there is much to see." The gift of imagination. As Theo followed Seraphina through the meadow, he felt a sense of wonder and lightness that he had never experienced before. Every step felt effortless, as though the ground itself was lifting him forward. Seraphina led him to a group of people, sitting in a circle beneath a massive tree with golden leaves. They were laughing and talking, their hands moving quickly as they painted, sculpted, and wove intricate patterns into the air. "Who are they?" Theo asked. "They are the dreamers," Seraphina said. "Those who carry the feather. Their creativity shapes this realm, just as their ideas shape the world beyond." Theo watched in awe as one of the dreamers reached out and plucked a golden leaf from the tree. The leaf shimmered and transformed into a small bird, which fluttered into the air and joined a flock of similar creations. "Everything here is possible because of imagination," Seraphina said. "The feather carriers see the world not as it is, but as it could be." Theo felt a pang of longing as he watched the dreamer's work. He thought of his sister Clara, her laughter filling their home as she painted vivid scenes of the world beyond the valley. "Could I do that?" Theo asked hesitantly. Seraphina smiled. "Of course. The feather lives within you. Theo, all you need is the courage to let it guide you, the burden of lightness." As the day wore on, Theo felt himself growing more confident in the realm. He began to experiment, shaping small objects with his hands and watching in amazement as they came to life. He created flowers that bloomed in an instant, butterflies that danced through the air, and glowing orbs that floated above his head like tiny stars. But as night fell, Theo noticed something strange. The dreamers, who had been so full of energy and laughter, began to look tired. Their movements slowed, and their creations lost some of their brilliance. "What's happening?" Theo asked Seraphina. "The feather is a gift, but it is also a burden," she said quietly. "The dreamers pour their energy into their creations, but they often forget to care for themselves. Freedom and creativity are beautiful, but without balance they can lead to exhaustion." Theo frowned, his earlier excitement fading. He thought of Clara, how she would sometimes disappear into her art for days, forgetting to eat or sleep. "Is there a way to stop it?" Theo asked. Seraphina shook her head. "The path of the feather is one of endless creation, but it is also one of endless striving. That is why balance is so important. The path of strength." As Theo pondered Seraphina's words, the amulet in his hand began to glow again. The world around him blurred, and he felt the weightless sensation of being pulled into another realm. When the world came back into focus, Theo found himself standing in a completely different place. The meadow was gone, replaced by a rocky landscape that stretched toward a distant horizon. The sky above was a deep, endless gray, and the air was cool and heavy. At the center of the landscape stood a massive stone arch, its surface carved with intricate patterns of vines and stars. "Welcome to the realm of strength," said a deep, resonant voice. Theo turned to see a towering figure approaching him. It was a man with broad shoulders and a face weathered by time, his eyes steady and unyielding. "I am Gideon," the man said, "and this is the path of the stone, the test of endurance." As Gideon led Theo through the rocky landscape, Theo couldn't help but notice how heavy his steps felt. The ground beneath him was solid and unyielding, and every movement required effort. This realm is built on strength and stability, Gideon said. The stone carriers are the foundation of the world. Without them, nothing would stand. They came to a massive wall of stone, where several figures were working to carve intricate designs into its surface. Their movements were slow but precise, each strike of their tools sending echoes through the air. "They are the builders," Gideon said. "They create the structures that hold the world together. Their work is slow, but it endures." Theo watched as one of the builders placed a finished stone into a massive archway. The structure gleamed faintly, its edges fitting perfectly together. "It's incredible," Theo said. "But it is not without cost," Gideon said. He led Theo to a nearby plateau, where several stone carriers sat in silence. Their faces were lined with weariness, their hands calloused and bruised. "The stone demands patience and endurance," Gideon said. "It is a path of strength, but it can also be a heavy burden." Theo felt a pang of recognition. He thought of Marcus, how his brother worked tirelessly to support their family. His shoulders hunched under the weight of his responsibilities. "Is it worth it?" Theo asked quietly. Gideon looked at him for a long moment before answering. "That is a question only you can answer. A new understanding." As the amulet began to glow again, Theo felt a surge of both relief and longing. The two paths, the feather and the stone, were so different, yet both held beauty and hardship. The question remained, which path was his? As the world blurred and shifted once more, Theo clutched the amulet tightly in his hand. He didn't know where it would lead him next, but he knew he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Chapter 3: The Pillar of Balance. The world around Theo blurred once more, swirling with light and shadow as the amulet in his hand grew warmer. The realms of the feather and the stone faded into memory, replaced by a vast expanse of grey mist. When the light finally dimmed, Theo found himself standing in a strange new place. The ground beneath his feet was solid, but he couldn't tell whether it was stone or earth. The air was cool and heavy, carrying the faint scent of rain. Before him loomed a massive structure, the Pillar of Balance. It wasn't like the small weathered monument in Elderwood Square. This pillar was enormous, stretching high into the mist-shrouded sky. Its surface was carved with intricate designs of feathers and stones, their shapes interwoven like the threads of a tapestry. Theo's breath caught in his throat. "Where am I?" he whispered. The amulet in his hand pulsed softly, and a familiar voice answered, "You are at the heart of the choosing." Theo turned to see Seraphina and Gideon standing side by side. Their expressions were calm but serious, and their presence filled the space with an odd sense of gravity. The path of the feather and the path of the stone converge here, Seraphina said, her voice gentle. "This is where the balance is found, a trial of understanding." Theo's gaze shifted between the two guides. "Why am I here?" he asked. "To make your choice," Gideon said simply. Theo hesitated, his grip tightening on the amulet. "But I still don't know what to choose. The feather is beautiful, but it's exhausting. The stone is strong, but it's so heavy. How am I supposed to decide?" Seraphina stepped forward, her expression softening. The choice is not just about what you value, Theo. It's about who you are. And what you are willing to carry, Gideon added. Theo looked up at the towering pillar of balance, his thoughts spinning. He had seen the beauty and the hardship of both paths, but the idea of committing to just one felt impossible. "What if I can't choose?" he asked, his voice trembling. Seraphina and Gideon exchanged a glance before stepping aside, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling up the side of the pillar. "Then you must climb," Gideon said. "The pillar will show you the truth." The ascent. Theo stared at the staircase, its steps carved from smooth stone. The path seemed to stretch endlessly into the mist, its destination hidden from view. He swallowed hard, his palms slick with sweat. "What's at the top?" Seraphina smiled faintly. "Only you can find out." Taking a deep breath, Theo stepped onto the first stair. The stone was cool beneath his feet, and the air grew heavier with each step. As he climbed, the carvings on the pillar seemed to shift and move, their patterns coming to life. Feathers danced in the breeze, their edges glowing with golden light, while stones glimmered with a deep, steady warmth. The higher Theo climbed, the more the weight of the journey pressed down on him. His legs ached and his chest burned with every breath. But something deeper drove him forward. Quiet determination that he couldn't quite explain. The voices of the pillar. Halfway up the staircase, Theo paused to catch his breath. The mist around him was thick, swirling like a living thing. As he stood there, the carvings on the pillar began to glow brighter, and a chorus of voices filled the air. "The feather is freedom," one voice whispered. "It lifts you above the burdens of the world and lets you dream of what could be." "The stone is strength," another voice said. "It grounds you in the present and gives you the endurance to shape your reality." Theo turned in a slow circle, the voices weaving around him like a song. "Both paths have value," the voices continued. "But balance is not found in the extremes. It is found in the spaces between." Theo frowned, his brow furrowing. What does that mean? The voices faded, leaving only the sound of his own breathing. The weight of the feather. As Theo continued his ascent, the air grew lighter, and the staircase shifted beneath his feet. The smooth stone transformed into soft, shimmering clouds that buoyed his steps. At first, the sensation was exhilarating. Theo felt weightless, as though he could leap into the sky and never fall. The clouds glowed with a warm golden light, and the air was filled with the faint sound of laughter. But as he climbed higher, Theo began to feel uneasy. The clouds beneath his feet became less stable, shifting and swirling with each step. The laughter grew louder, echoing in his ears until it felt overwhelming. Theo stumbled, his arms flailing as the clouds wavered beneath him. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice swallowed by the sound. The clouds solidified and the laughter faded, leaving Theo gasping for breath. "Lightness can be beautiful," the pillar whispered, "but it can also be fleeting. Without stability, even the brightest dreams can crumble." Theo nodded, his heart pounding as he continued upward. The burden of the stone. The clouds faded, and the staircase returned to solid stone. But this time, the steps were steeper, their surfaces rough and uneven. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though an invisible weight pressed down on Theo's shoulders. The carvings of stones glimmered faintly, their shapes steady and unyielding. The air was silent, save for the sound of Theo's labored breathing. As he climbed, his legs trembled and his arms ached from pulling himself upward. The weight was relentless, and for a moment, Theo thought he wouldn't be able to go on. "I can't do this," he muttered, sinking to his knees. But then he noticed something. The carvings of stones weren't just symbols, they were foundations. Each one supported the step above it, creating a structure that was solid and enduring. Theo took a deep breath, his gaze steadying. "It's hard," he said quietly, "but it holds." The weight didn't lessen, but Theo found the strength to keep climbing. The summit. At last Theo reached the top of the pillar. The mist parted, revealing a wide platform carved with the symbols of both the feather and the stone. In the center of the platform stood a small pedestal, and resting upon it was an object that took Theo's breath away. It was a feather carved from stone, its surface smooth and shimmering with golden light. Theo stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch it. The moment his fingers brushed the object, a wave of warmth spread through him, and the voices of the pillar returned. "Balance is not choosing one path over the other," the voices said. "It is understanding the value of both and finding strength to carry them together." Tears filled Theo's eyes as he held the feather stone in his hands. He thought of Marcus, with his unshakable strength, and Clara, with her boundless creativity. He thought of his own doubts and fears, and the quiet determination that had driven him forward. "I understand," he whispered. "A new choice." When Theo opened his eyes, he was back in the village square. The pillar of balance loomed before him, and the villagers stood in silence, their eyes fixed on him. Elara stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Have you made your choice, Theo?" she asked. Theo looked down at the amulet in his hand, its surface shimmering faintly. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, holding it high for all to see. "I choose both," he said, his voice steady. The crowd murmured in surprise, but Elara smiled, her eyes glinting with approval. "A wise choice," she said, "for true balance is not found in separation, but in unity." The villagers erupted into applause, and Theo felt a warmth spread through his chest. For the first time he felt at peace, not because he had chosen one path, but because he had embraced both. Thank you for joining us at Midnight Grove for the feather and the stone. Theo's journey reminds us that balance isn't about choosing one side. It's about embracing all parts of who we are. As you drift off to sleep, may his story inspire you to find your own balance and to walk through life with both lightness and strength. Sweet dreams, and we'll see you next time for another magical tale.